Hello, everyone. This is Tetrafolium, and today we're here to talk about some ADV news. There is not a lot that goes on in ADV that really shakes up the status quo, and arguably we could say that this doesn't really shake up the status quo that much. But without burying the lead, we're talking about the recent Quick Claw ban in Generation 3. Um, there was a lot more divisive opinions on this topic than I sort of expected. And we're going to be examining that for the most part today. I put this comment from my recent poll on QuickClaw from a person that I know quite well in the community, and I super duper value what they do for this community, so I will not tolerate any sort of hate on them. But shout outs to the Team Fortress 2 comms goat, who kind of echoed what I was sort of expecting as well, that I did not expect this to be so controversial. Let's take a look at first the mechanics and viability of Quick Claw. And I want to emphasize this because I saw a lot of posts that got the information on this incorrect. So I want to clear this up. In Gen 3, Quick Claw allows a Pokemon to move first in their priority bracket 20% of the time. And I bold 20% because many of you commented 10% of the time. That's not true. It's 20%. Does that really make much of a difference? I mean, sort of, right? Take Jirachi, for example. Fire Punch, most Pokemon only have a 10% chance to burn with that, but Jirachi's got the 20%. And, you do feel that in game, that doubled chance to get that effect. So, Quick Claw activating just as often as a Jirachi Fire Punch burn. But, let's not split hairs about, what is ultimately, a small difference in activation percentage. And unlike in future generations, Quick Claw does not have an activation message. So in, I believe, Gen 4 onward, I could maybe be mistaken about Gen 4, but at least definitely in Gen 9, for example, if your Pokemon has Quick Claw and Quick Claw activates that turn, there will be a message that pops up that says so-and-so's Quick Claw activated, and they're gonna move faster than usual that turn. Now, this message will come up even if your Pokemon gets outsped by a priority move. So, let's say I have my Iron Hands using Drain Punch, and you have your Dragonite using Extreme Speed. And my Iron Hands' Quick Claw activates. In Gen 9, it'll say Iron Hands' Quick Claw activated, but Dragonite's Extreme Speed will go off first, and then the Iron Hands' Drain Punch will happen. In ADV, that's not how it works. And in fact, in a metagame like ADV where priority moves are kind of rare, this can get a little bit insidious. And maybe if I show some B-roll replays, you might be able to see some of that in action. And it's also the source of a lot of confusion. I've seen many posts in the ADV bug reports forums where it's hey, I had my Aerodactyl in versus an opponent's Magneton, and then they were faster and killed me with Thunderbolt. And I'm like, well, how does that happen? Are they hacking? Is there a bug in the game, an overflow issue or something, whatever? It's Quick Claw. That's the answer. So, yeah. Quick Claw is extremely rarely used on high ladder and in tournament games. And I wanted to note as well that the non-Smogon tournaments, the ones that you might be familiar with, are Revival, Gymvitational, and Mushi League. They ban all of the RNG items, including Quick Claw, Focus Band, King's Rock. so on and so forth. So if you're familiar with revival tournaments and you like watching those replays, you will not see a Quick Claw because it's banned from those formats. That's not necessarily true for the Smogon-based tournaments. So if you're familiar with things like SPL or even like, I think, OST, stuff like that, you are allowed to use Quick Claw. Well, not anymore, but you were allowed to use Quick Claw in those tournaments. The reason why you didn't see them even in the tournaments where Quick Claw was allowed is because of the inconsistency of Quick Claw. When you only get it to activate 20% of the time, that means 80% of the time you have an item that is not doing anything for you. And if you're putting it on a Pokemon that is only going to be able to click, let's say, 3 moves in a game, like, you're more likely than not to not get a Quick Claw activation at all. So, like, it's not super worth betting your Pokemon on that. Especially if you can get something that has more guaranteed value, like Leftovers or Lumberry or Choice Band, which are the more commonly used items in ADV. But let's talk about when you might want to use Quick Claw. I mean, really, the answer is never, because almost every Pokemon gets more value out of a different item. But there are 4 criteria that make a reasonable Quick Claw candidate, and they are that the Pokemon is too frail to get much value from Leftovers. Like, if a Pokemon is going to die in 1 or 2 hits anyway, then, like, your Leftovers are probably not helping you that much. And this is especially true for Pokemon that do not take Sandstorm damage. You know, like Gengar, for example, is a pretty frail Pokemon, but it can get a good number of turns in a game with proper positioning. However, those turns are reduced if it doesn't have Leftovers to offset the Sandstorm damage. Whereas a Pokemon like, let's say, Metagross, is not very frail, so this is not necessarily the best example, but Metagross doesn't take Sandstorm damage, so every turn that it stays on the field, it is not having to worry about that passive chip. So that's good to know. If the Pokemon does not have enough physical firepower to justify a Choice Band, then you would probably want to use a Quick Claw instead. This is a really rare case because I find that most of the really to get into the third criterion, that they're too slow to outspeed common threats. Most of the slow Pokemon are either very bulky or physical attackers. There are not very many slow special attacking or mixed attacking Pokemon, but that is the sort of ideal for using Quick Claw. And then the fourth is that they're trapped by Dugtrio. And by trapped by Dugtrio, I mean that they cannot get away from Arena Trap, and Dugtrio is very likely to one-shot or, do heavy, irrecoverable damage to them. And the reason being is that, well, if you're trapped by Dugtrio, then if your opponent has Dugtrio and they bring it in on your Pokemon as like a revenge kill, then that Pokemon's not going to be able to get value anyway. So you might as well have a 1 in 5 chance to continue to get value with this Pokemon than a 0% chance, right? So here are probably the 4 Pokemon that I would say were the best users of Quick Claw. Camerupt is probably the quintessential, and I'm going to talk about him in a little bit more detail, but let me get into the other Pokemon first. Magneton. You might think, well, Magneton only ever runs Magnet. And that's kind of true. Magnet is definitely its most used item because it helps it to secure the one shot on Skarmory, although technically Skarmory, if it runs max special defense and HP, it can live a magnet boosted Thunderbolt from Magneton about 1 in 4 times. Although that's still quite good odds for Magneton. A 3 out of 4 chance to just completely kill the Skarmory, and if Skarmory has any less investment than that, then the chances go up. So that's one use case for it. The reason you might want to use it on something like Magneton, I kind of gave it as an example earlier, but let's say you trap and kill the Skarmory, and then they're switching to something like, I don't know, Charizard or Aerodactyl or Salamence, like Pokemon that very commonly outspeed Magneton. That Magneton could fire off a very, very powerful Thunderbolt or Thunder Wave or even Toxic into. You give yourself that 1 in 5 chance to punish them for trying to revenge kill you with a Pokemon that doesn't like to take those things, which, if you're of one perspective, you might think, oh, that's really cool that Magneton can get that extra value. If you're of another perspective, you might think that that's bullshit. And we're going to be talking about that a lot in this video, so don't you worry. Smeargle is a very frail Pokemon. It can oftentimes run enough investment to live one key hit, like famously Smeargle, if it runs a lot of special defense, it can live a Thunderbolt from Zapdos, and that's typically what you would do with Smeargle in the lead, so that you can set up your Spore and then get your spikes, despite the fact that you just ate a Thunderbolt. So, yeah, Smeargle not very commonly going to live more than one hit, so Leftovers is not a super duper valuable item on it. You might as well put something like Quick Claw in case you end up in a matchup where your opponent has something that is faster than the Smeargle, in which case you have a 1 in 5 chance to put them to sleep before they can do anything to you. Or, like, on a turn that you were going to sack your Smeargle anyway, you could Explode or click Memento to mitigate your opponent's chances to make progress against your Smeargle. So, you know, there's just a sort of example there. Regirock. Regirock is not really the best candidate for it because it does get a lot of value out of Leftovers and Choice Band. It's got a lot of physical bulk, and it loves to be able to just sponge physical hits in certain matchups. You know, like having Leftovers could be the difference between like a 2 or a 3 hit KO versus some of the strongest Earthquakes in the tier. So that's like really high value, at least in my opinion. And then Choice Band is a very reasonable item for Regirock because it's got a pretty respectable base 100 attack stat and access to Explosion. And a Choice Banded Explosion is always quite good to click. It's a very good trading tool. However, you could justify Quick Claw on Regirock because it doesn't take that many special hits. It's probably going to get 2-hit KO'd by a lot of the strongest special hits, particularly water and grass type moves. So if you can maybe fish a Quick Claw to get a Thunder Wave off early on your opponent, that could be good. You could also get an Explosion off earlier than you ought to be able to. Like on a turn that you were going to sack the Regirock anyway, just get a little bit of extra value there. It's a reasonable take there. And then finally, or really like primarily, Camerupt. Camerupt is like probably the perfect Pokemon to put Quick Claw on because, yes, it's got a decent attack stat and it's got access to Earthquake and Explosion, which are two of your best physical moves in the game. But like, it's not a Pokemon that really wants to run Choice Band because that doesn't really help it out with its fire coverage, or it's usually wanting to run Hidden Power as coverage as well, and not a Hidden Power that is physically oriented. Usually it's going to be like Hidden Power Ice or Hidden Power Grass. So Yeah, you have that mixed coverage, so choice band's not helping you when you're clicking your special attacks. And you know, yes, it would help you with your earthquake, and yes, it would help you with your explosion, but you're pretty slow. You're only base 30, I think, with camera up. So speed times Snorlax, which is not a fantastic speed tier to be a part of, but it is what it is. And camera up, it does have okay natural bulk. However, its type of ground and fire is not very conducive to surviving a lot of hits. You're weak to a lot of common types like ground and water, and you don't have that many valuable resistances that you would expect out of a ground type. Like, for example, rock. You like being able to resist rock is a huge deal in the ADV metagame, because Tyranitar and Aerodactyl and Salamence are all quite popular and all love to run Rock Slide. So, being able to come in and not take too much damage from that move is quite good. Camera up, not so lucky. So, Quick Claw kind of patches up the weaknesses of Camera Up at least 1 out of 5 times. And you don't really get tons of value out of running a different item on Camera Up. Now, that being said, let's not get it twisted. Leftovers is still a good item, and Camera Up can make plenty good use out of Leftovers. And like maybe even like from a consistency standpoint, Leftovers might arguably be better than Quick Claw on Camera Up. However, Camera Up is a fairly niche Pokemon as it stands, so I guess it kind of makes sense. Maybe you want to pair it with a niche item. And then Trapped by Dugtrio. I mean, all of these Pokemon are to greater or lesser extents Trapped by Dugtrio. Ironically, despite being weak to Earthquake, Regirock is probably the least easily trapped by Dugtrio because it has such a high defense stat. But Smeargle is so frail, despite the fact that it doesn't take super effective damage, it does not want to get in versus Dugtrio. It's just gonna get popped by an Earthquake. Magneton, same idea. And Camera Up especially. So having that 1 in 5 to sort of flip that Dugtrio matchup is sometimes worth it, at least in a theoretical sense. But let's talk about the survey results. So, on May 17th, this user right here, Shitrock Enjoyer, also known as Fredazi, posted a sort of poll asking the members of the ADV community what they think about Quick Claw and whether they would be in favor of banning it. And not to my surprise, maybe to some of your surprise, there was an 80-20 split in favor of banning Quick Claw, which is kind of insane. You very rarely get 4 out of 5 competitive Pokemon players to agree about anything. So the fact that 80% were in favor of banning Quick Claw is a big deal. And I want to note something. This was not a suspect test. You did not have to have any sort of requirements like high GXC or high ELO or whatever to respond to this. You just had to have a Smogon account, which anybody can make, and find this post and submit your thoughts on it. There's maybe an argument that there was not as much publicity on this as maybe there should have been, but I will contend that I'm glad that it's decided by people who are active enough to use the Smogon forums rather than just thrown out into say for example my poll or Jimothy Cool's poll, because you can't really, it's hard to attenuate the people who do not play and having them respond. As it stands, I don't really care whether you voted yes or no. And I don't really mind if you are somebody who disagrees with the ban result. But I don't think that you should vote if you don't play. Should you be able to decide how many spaces a pawn can move if you've never played a game of chess in your life, like that would be ridiculous. I mean, it's not necessarily 1-to-1, but yeah. So there you go. 100 respondents, 80% of them said they want to ban Quick Claw. So I sort of thought, like, okay, this would be kind of an open and shut case. If 80% of people on a public forum wanted the Quick Claw to be banned, then there's probably going to be consensus across the board on that matter, right? Well, I looked at my poll, and these were the results. So 7% of you said Quick Claw is broken. 41% of you said that it's not broken, but you would still ban it. And we can maybe discuss what the nuance of that is. 35% said no, you want to keep Quick Claw, and 17% of you said that you don't know, or you just wanted to see the results. So what I basically did is I cut out the do not know /see results for the sake of this statistical analysis here. And that means that less than 60% of you were in favor of banning Quick Claw. That would be in the top two categories. That's really interesting to me, because that is significantly dissimilar from what the Smogon voting community had to say. If you're into statistics, it was a p-value of less than a 10,000th, which is extremely, extremely dissimilar. I guess as a quick explanation what a p-value is, it's a measure of how likely something is to happen by random chance. So like, you know, if I flip a coin, say 20 times, how likely is it that I would get 12 heads? It's actually pretty likely. So that's just probably a random chance that caused that result to happen. However, if I flip the coin 20 times and I got heads 17 times, that's not that likely to happen, and in fact probably would indicate statistical significance. So maybe this coin potentially was like weighted or rigged in some way. Not always true. You know, there's still a chance that it was just random, that could have happened. But this is sort of the idea behind a p-value. So low p-value means not likely to happen based on random chance. And I was thinking, okay, well, my first thought is that there's going to be a difference in demographic between these two communities, so they probably don't necessarily align. But I wanted to compare that to the speed pass suspect test. So let's take a look at that. From the previous idea, 80% in favor of banning. It's an incredible supermajority. Speed pass was only a 69% majority, which is nice. And here are the results from the speed pass ban. I want to note that the speed pass, unlike the Quick Claw, was not a public poll. You had to get ELO and GXC requirements in order to be able to vote on this. Let's not get too deep in the weeds about whether that's a fair process or not. I'm personally of the opinion that it is, but you know, I'm open and I understand the argument that it isn't. But yeah, these are the results here. And this is the results from the poll from 9 months ago. Wow, time really flies. From my channel asking if a suspect was to happen, what would you vote? And yeah, a slight majority of you did want Speed Pass to be banned. In fact, it was about 57%, so that's if we're excluding the do not know /see results people. Which is kind of interesting. It's about the same as the Quick Claw ban. But if we compare this to what the suspect test voting base wanted, it's actually not a very statistically significant result. There, you know, we can have different confidence intervals. If we have a lower confidence interval, then we might be more willing to say that it's statistically significant. This standard is usually 95%. It depends on what you're testing for, but we're just going to go with 95% here. And the p-value suggests there's about a 7% likelihood that these two polls would happen just by random chance of each other. So that's not like too crazy and in fact, could have been possible that Speed Pass would have found a 57% in, we're saying 7% of worlds here. So that's kind of interesting to me that there's seemingly that big a disconnect. Now, you could say, based on just the pure statistics, that there's not a disconnect, because 57% of you guys were in favor of banning Speed Pass, 58% of you were in favor of banning Quick Claw. So you could from that perspective argue, well, you guys view them as about the same. But I think it definitely is interesting to me, the disconnect between the Smogon voting base and this YouTube voting base, as far as it goes for Quick Claw, whereas with Speed Pass it was about even, right? Or at least within a statistical margin of error. So why is there the disconnect? I mean, that's a great question. I don't know exactly. But the rest of this video is going to be me sort of philosophizing and trying to figure out maybe why there is a disconnect. And admittedly, like, this is going to be speculative. So you'll have to take what I'm saying here with a grain of salt. And I have... this happened pretty quickly. The turnaround on this was, I think, about 2 weeks. So... I wasn't exactly ready to make this quickly, but we're gonna roll with basically what I have seen from my comments here. I'm not going to, or let's look at this slide before we get into the nitty-gritty here. I'm not going to put anybody's comments on screen because I don't want to make anybody feel specifically targeted. And that's because, for one, I don't want you to feel like I'm looking at your specific take and, like, either disagreeing with you in specific or agreeing with you in specific. I also don't want to put your comment on the screen and have other people go and, like, harass you for that. And in fact, do not do that. That's really fucking lame, and I think you are a terrible person if you do that. So, yeah. I'm gonna group similar topics together. So I might be talking about, like, an umbrella of ideas. This may lose some of the nuance of the specific opinions that are kind of grouped into here. So I might be mixing things that weren't intended to be mixed. So keep that in mind if you think that I'm losing some of that nuance there. And then I'm going to try to stay open-minded and, like, receptive to the sort of ideas that you guys have brought forward. I really appreciate it when you guys comment on my stuff and like and subscribe and all that. And this forum, or I guess poll that I posted, is the thing that has received the most comments out of anything on my YouTube channel. So that's really good for my analytics, and once again, I really appreciate that. And I want you guys to let your opinions be heard. And I want to, again, stay open-minded because I'm learning a lot from you guys. But I am going to be honest in my response. If I disagree with your take, I'm going to say that I disagree with it, and I'm going to try to explain why. And hopefully we can keep the ideas sort of civil here. I guess before we really begin, if you want to know, I did vote on this, and I did vote in favor of banning Quick Claw. And the reason why, which I'm going to be using to sort of frame a broader community, or the broader community of people who were in favor of banning, is that I think that it ultimately does not allow for effective skill expression when somebody uses it. What I mean by that is, if, like, compared to other RNG effects, like, let's say I use Hydro Pump and I miss. Well, yes, that kind of sucks. Like, I was favored to hit, but the skill expression there is I chose to use a move that could miss when I could have chosen to use a move that is 100% accurate because I valued the extra power in that move. So if I miss, that is a conscious choice on my end for the skill expression there. We could talk about this in sort of the reverse way as well. Say my opponent is using Aerodactyl and they have Rock Slide. And of course, we know Rock Slide's got a 30% flinch chance, assuming that it hits. So effectively, a 27% chance to flinch on any given turn, because obviously you can't flinch if you miss. So if my opponent flinches me, is that skill expression? I would argue yes, because I know that Aerodactyl is a Pokemon that exists in the metagame. In fact, it's a quite popular Pokemon in the metagame, and it's also not even the only Pokemon that uses Rock Slide. So I know that that move is something that I'm going to have to contend with. So when I build my team, I am putting the resources on my team that help me to deal with Aerodactyl. So I chose, say, to put a Swampert on my team to be my Aerodactyl counter, or a Metagross, or a Jirachi, all these Pokemon that resist Rock that can mitigate the effects of bad luck via Rock Slide. Now, that's not 100% perfect. There are definitely cases where Aerodactyl gets like 5 Rock Slide flinches in a row and kills a Pokemon that should otherwise beat it one-on-one. And when that happens, it is frustrating. I'm not going to lie. But I know that ultimately that's a really low chance to happen. And I am in control of the counterplay to that situation. I don't think that that's necessarily true for Quick Claw. We'll take Camerupt as an example. Camerupt is going to be using 3 moves very commonly: Fire Blast, Earthquake, and Explosion. The 4th move, it might be Hidden Power, it might be Toxic, it could even be Substitute. Like that's sort of like a flex spot, but we're going to focus on the core 3: Fire Blast, Earthquake, and Explosion. How many Pokemon can take all 3 of those moves very well? The answer is like maybe Aerodactyl, and honestly, not really, because even though it resists Explosion, it's a quite frail Pokemon, so it's going to be taking a hefty chunk from that. Plus, you don't really want to switch your Aerodactyl into like a Fire Blast, because that's going to pretty easily put you into Explosion range. So, yeah, you don't really have a good defensive switch if you want to have consistent counterplay into Camerupt. So oftentimes what you're going to have to do is stay in, and with a Pokemon that is oftentimes going to have a super effective move that does threaten to kill the Camerupt. And you're going to have to say, 80% of the time, I get my move off. And 20% of the time, they click their super effective Fire Blast, and they're faster than me, and they hit me, and I die. Or their super effective Earthquake, and they hit me, and I die. Or Explosion, and I die. You could make the argument that you could go to a Pokemon, say like Suicune or Milotic, that incentivizes the Camerupt to explode. And then you pivot to a Pokemon that takes the explosion quite well, like say Gengar. And yeah, okay, if you've conditioned your opponent that they're going to be clicking Explosion on that play, that is a fairly reasonable form of counterplay. However, you can't always count on your opponent to make that play. What if they predict you to switch and they click Fire Blast and they own you for that? And it's like, yes, that was a good play. That was a good read. I don't know if I say a good play, but it was a good read by your opponent. The Camerupt player, they outskilled on that turn, and good on them. But we're only in this situation in the first place because we don't want to lose our whole Milotic or virtually our whole Suicune to a 20% chance that they outspeed and click Explosion. In the vast majority of cases, if I go to my Pokemon that outspeeds and has a 4 times super effective move, I should be expecting that this Pokemon wins, right? Like, and that's what Pokemon oftentimes is about, is those matchups. Like, Suicune is supposed to beat a Pokemon like Magcargo. Magcargo's not supposed to win that. But like the flip side is Magcargo is supposed to beat a Pokemon like, let's say, who's a Pokemon that doesn't like rock, fire? Ninjask, we'll say. Like Ninjask is not usually supposed to win that. Now, I guess, you know, you could run HP ground and hit the Magcargo quite well, but like, you know, you sort of get the point here, is that, you know, we are supposed to have these matchups, and Quick Claw, I think it kind of undermines that part of the game. And we could, you know, there's some room to argue about whether that is like a core element of Pokemon, that there is like that Pokemon are supposed to have these sort of matchups, or that Pokemon, because, you know, there are certain Pokemon that can play around their weaknesses by different set choices, right? Like, well, let's not get too deep into those weeds. I'm sure you sort of get where I'm coming from here. But let's take a little bit more of a response to the things that are going on here. For those of you who like watching the video, like maybe you're watching it on your TV or something, there's not going to be too much like visual stimulus going on here. I may try to put some B-roll of like some replays in the video in post, but that is to say that those of you who are watching and you have like your phone in your pocket, or you're like doing like podcast style, like don't worry, you're not missing out on much at this point in the video. I mean, frankly, it's a Tetrafolium video. The visuals aren't that impressive as it stands, so don't feel obligated to go back and watch the video element of this if you haven't been already at this point. But yeah, just as a sort of like, feel free to stick your phone in your pocket at this point if you're worried that you're missing out on anything. Our first talking point is going to be comparing to other RNG elements. A lot of you, like, you're saying, why would we ban Quick Claw because of its RNG elements and not something like Thunder Wave or Ice Beam or like Jirachi? Because, you know, Jirachi's all of its 10% secondary effects are 20%, same as Quick Claw. Well, I kind of touched on this with my talking point earlier, is that it comes down to like what an opponent can do to counterplay around it. There are Pokemon that are quite likely to handle Jirachi even through its chances to get things like a paralysis with Body Slam, a burn with Fire Punch, a freeze with Ice Punch. And you can construct a team that is resilient to that sort of idea. Now, yes, if they get the RNG, it does suck. But like in general, like I'm pretty sure if I have a Lumberry Tyranitar, I'm gonna be able to beat most Jirachi one-on-one. If I have a combination of Swampert and Blissey on a team, I'm pretty sure I can beat most Jirachi one-on-one. Not every single one of them, necessarily. But, you know, they could run, like, mixed with, like, Hidden Power Grass, Dynamic Punch, stuff like that. But, yeah, for the most part, I can construct a team that even in the face of some hacks from Jirachi, RNG, if you're not as familiar with, like, the slang terms that Pokemon use, hacks is like when RNG effects negatively impact your chances to win a game. Like we can be somewhat resilient in that. We could make an argument like, okay, if a Pokemon like Jirachi had so much, like necessitated so much team building decisions that like it constrains your builder, then we could make an argument for banning it, right? And I think that some people do make that argument in DPP, for example, where it's got Iron Head, which is a even more consistent way for Jirachi to generate value against Pokemon that would otherwise beat it. You know, a 60% chance to flinch on any given turn is quite high, and even Pokemon that should be living like 3 or 4 Iron Heads, like say like Infernape, are not necessarily the best suited for taking on Jirachi, because it's not that unlikely that Jirachi could get 3 or 4 flinches in a row. So, yeah. And if you want to argue, like, okay, then, like, it's not that reasonable for me to have to slot Heatran on every team, or have Swampert on every team, or have faster Choice Scarfers on every team, then you could make that argument, perhaps. I'm not going to talk too much about that, because I don't play a lot of DPP, so I'm not very qualified to discuss whether Jirachi really is that big a constraint on the team builder. But I do play a lot of ADV, and I know that Jirachi is not nearly that in ADV. Like, yes, some people do complain about it, and I understand, but, like, you know, there are plenty of reasonable options on a team, and most naturally good teams are going to have Jirachi answers, regardless. So, there you go. You have, for example, you have Dugtrio, which is a fantastic Pokemon for removing a Jirachi from a game, just as long as you don't switch it into a Body Slam haphazardly. So, yeah. And, yeah, it's... When it comes to Quick Claw, it's not just that it's an RNG effect. It's that there isn't really much counterplay. Like, the options for playing around it would be Knockoff, which is a very underrepresented move in the metagame for good reason, because not a lot of great Pokemon have access to it. Your most viable options for Knockoff are usually like Hariyama, who's UUBL, Armaldo, who's UUBL, and Sableye, who is an NU Pokemon. So, not to say that they cannot be used to good effect and have not won games and were not valuable members of those teams, but you can't really just say, slap those guys on your team to play around it. In addition, unlike Quick Claw, you know that a Pokemon like Hariyama could be packing Knockoff. So as the Quick Claw user, if you really don't want your Quick Claw to get knocked off, you can play around that by switching into a different Pokemon to take the knockoff. Whereas, as the non-Quick Claw user, I don't know which one of your Pokemon could have Quick Claw. And that's where the sort of like the crux of the argument is here. Like, you know, yeah, Rock Slide is going to affect the outcome of more games than Quick Claw is. And it is going to steal more games than Quick Claw is, because it's even more consistent at doing that. But I know Aerodactyl has Rock Slide. I know Tyranitar is going to have Rock Slide, or at least that it could have Rock Slide. I know that Metagross and Salamence and Regirock and all of these Pokemon that get it could be using it. So I know what I'm supposed to do to play around that if I've figured out how to use my team. Whereas Quick Claw, literally any Pokemon could have Quick Claw. I did talk about which Pokemon are the most effective, but you could technically run Quick Claw on anything. You could run it on Vaporeon in the lead, so that, say, like, you're up against Zapdos, right? Zapdos is going to click Thunderbolt. Does not quite kill Vaporeon. Vaporeon's going to click Ice Beam. Does not quite kill Zapdos. As the Zapdos user, if you want to eliminate the Vaporeon, the idea is, oh, okay, you're going to click Thunderbolt again, because that's just the smart thing to do. And like, you've seen that the Vaporeon doesn't have leftovers, but that doesn't mean that it has Quick Claw necessarily. It could be a Lumberry, it could be Mystic Water, for example. So you're going to click Thunderbolt again here. And then they have Quick Claw. They get it on this one turn here that they absolutely needed it for, because otherwise they would just lose their Vaporeon, and they kill your Zapdos here. So they flip that matchup. you didn't know that that was going to happen, and you like get kind of owned by it. You could argue, okay, well, if you don't want to lose your Zapdos there, then you switch. Okay, but like you can't do that. You can't do that for every single Pokemon that is not running leftovers and say like, oh, this could be running Quick Claw, and if I want to play safe, I have to switch every single time. Like, is that not more restrictive than even like Rock Slide? Now, ultimately, the thing is, the best play in that case, regardless of whether that Vaporeon has Quick Claw or not, is to stay in with Zapdos and Quick Thunderbolt, because 4 out of 5 times, like, even if it does have Quick Claw, you're still going to kill it. But, personally, I think that is kind of a sucky situation to be in, that you have to, like, risk that for a matchup that, like, clearly the Zapdos should be winning in. Now, you could argue, okay, well, the Vaporeon could have got the 10% freeze or a critical hit on the first turn, and that would have won the matchup anyway. Okay, that's valid. I understand that, but the thing is, I know Vaporeon's going to be clicking Ice Beam, so if I'm choosing to stay in with my Zapdos, I'm accepting that risk there. Whereas, like, I think the issue is that because I don't know that the Vaporeon has Quick Claw, it makes it awkward to play around. And you expand this scenario to all 380 something Pokemon that you can use in the game. Well, I mean, a little less in OU, because of course, like, I think there are like 13 Pokemon banned to Ubers, so I think it's like 370 that you can use. So yeah, you expand that to all of those Pokemon and all of those interactions, and like, it's a little bit much, I think. This is a little bit more like theoretical though, because like, obviously not all 300 Pokemon are, well, for one, are even going to get used, and for two, are going to run Quick Claw, but like, the possibility exists, and there are real cases, which we might be seeing some of them in the B-roll, if I manage to put that in here, where it is happening. So, yeah. The RNG elements, it's just to sort of like put a bow on this. It's not just that it's an RNG effect. It's that I can't effectively game plan for it because I don't know which Pokemon are going to be running the Quick Claw. I can effectively game plan for things like Rock Slide, because I do know which Pokemon can run that, and I do know what the effect of Rock Slide is, being that it's a rock type physical move, 70 base power, chance to flinch. So I can use a Pokemon that doesn't mind taking Rock Slide damage to sort of deal with that, right? Okay, let's move on to the next point here. Keep RNG in the game, or the sort of idea that Pokemon isn't chess, so why should we be attenuating the RNG effects? So this is there's kind of two sides to this, right? You're right that Pokemon isn't chess, and that a part of the game is the RNG management, right? That the best players are going to be players who can still find ways to win games despite the fact that, like, things didn't go their way, like that they got frozen on a Pokemon early, etc., etc. That's not to say that a more skilled player is always going to win in that situation, but the most skilled players will win those games more often than less skilled players will. That's sort of the idea. And chess is not quite like that, because there is no RNG, where the more skilled player is almost always going to win, because, like, they understand the game deeper than the opponent does. And Pokemon that's, like, deeper game knowledge is definitely going to help you win, but it's not going to be the reason why you win all the time. Or it's not going to carry you to the win all the time. So, yeah. And we've said this before, when, like, say somebody comes in who doesn't play Pokemon and they're like, you know, oh, like, Pokemon isn't a good competitive experience because like flinches and freeze and all of that bullshit. And you know, I mean, are they wrong? But no, but like we say, like, well, you know, Pokemon isn't chess. It's not supposed to be this completely deterministic game. What makes it fun is the RNG management. And yeah, I mean that I agree with that. But to say that we should never ban RNG related effects because RNG is the RNG management is a core part of the skill is a little bit too strong a statement, I'd say. Let's take, for example, like one-hit KO moves. We've banned those in Smogon singles, and that's been banned like forever. And like, there are not that many people who would seriously argue that we should bring Oko moves back. Now, I know that some of you in the comments are probably thinking, yeah, I would bring Oko moves back, and you know, I'm gonna allow you to have that opinion. I will not agree with you. I can't see eye to eye with you on that, because like I think that is like a 30% chance to just like score a one-hit KO on any Pokemon. Like, you know, with slight exception for type immunities, and like the ability Sturdy, which is a horrible ability in the vast majority of cases, or I should say at least a useless ability in the vast majority of cases. Like, that's, I don't think there's much room to like express your skill when you're using that move or when you're playing against that move, because you're kind of just like playing slots essentially. And that's maybe sort of where like the counter argument is like, you know, we're not playing chess, so we should keep the RNG elements. It's like, okay, well, if you want to play with a bunch of RNG elements, like go play slots, right? Like, to flip the sort of popular go play chess adage on its head. And I'm not saying that it's all like that, right? But I am saying, sort of like going back to my previous talking point here, is that it's a matter of like how you can manage the RNG, right? And I would argue that Quick Claw does not allow for as easy RNG management as other things, especially in the team builder, because I don't, like I said, I don't know which Pokemon you have on your team that could be running Quick Claw. It could be on all 6 of your Pokemon for all I know. And you could have any 6 Pokemon on a team. So yeah, like I might build in things like Lumberry and resistances and stuff like that to attenuate other RNG elements. But like, there's nothing you can really do for Quick Claw. You kind of just have to play into it most of the time. That's your best strategy, which is like not usually that conducive for skill expression. We're going to be using that term skill expression quite a lot coming up. Another thing I saw is that the item is not viable, and this is true. Like, most Pokemon do not want to run this item. Like, you are, like, say for example, Swampert. Like, okay, you might get a fast Earthquake off on something, but that usually isn't going to change anything. Like, most of the time that it activates for Swampert is going to be on a turn where it didn't really matter. Like, Swampert was going to eat the hit and get the Earthquake off anyway, and you didn't kill with Earthquake, so it's like whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, if you didn't get Quick Claw, the turn would have played out the same. And like, in addition to that, like, Swampert could be in a situation where like it's against something like Celebi, where unless you get like an Ice Beam freeze, you're just gonna die. And even if you get your Ice Beam off, and okay, you get the Quick Claw proc Ice Beam, deal 40%, Celebi kills you with Giga Drain, gets all of its HP back. Like, that's super duper not worth it. You've lost your entire Swampert because you were playing for a 1 in 5 chance that didn't even matter in the long run. And Swampert would get so much more value if it was running Leftovers instead. Or, like, if you're running Salak Berry with like Substitute and Endeavor. That's a really cool Swampert set. You should check out my video out about that Swampert set. But yeah, like, and this sort of idea expands to most Pokemon. Most Pokemon want leftovers. Leftovers is the dominant item for a reason, because it is the item that gets the most guaranteed value on the most Pokemon. Choice Band, Lumberry definitely have their use cases as well. I'm not gonna like explain too much about that, but yeah. So Quick Claw, I'm not gonna matter for most Pokemon. And even the Pokemon that do use it, like Camerupt, for example, this is a Pokemon that in ladder play has about 1% usage, which is virtually not at all. In fact, I could probably go 50 games and not see a single Camerupt, like quite easily, in fact. And if Quick Claw isn't in the zeitgeist, I would almost never see Camerupt. So yeah, even if Quick Claw is allowed and in the zeitgeist and everybody's thinking about it, I still don't usually see Camerupt. In fact, my next video is going to be about a ladder run that I had. I'm not going to spoil exactly what the result of it was, but just know that it was pretty sick. And I have 29 replays in that ladder run. I didn't see a single Camerupt. Like, you're not like, and I also didn't see a single Quick Claw, or at least if there was a Quick Claw, it didn't activate and I didn't know. So yeah, I understand what you're saying there, that the item's not viable. However, we could make the argument as well, like, okay, then if we ban it, does it really change anything? And you might look at that and say, well, if it doesn't change anything, then why ban it at all? But I would look at that and say, well, if we like ban it, then like why why get mad about it? Right? Like, if the council decided tomorrow that they were going to ban Caterpie from OU, like I wouldn't care. Like, nobody's going to use Caterpie anyway. Like, so but yeah, I could see the frustration of like, oh well, if they're just going to ban anything, whether it's good or not, like, then it makes it feel like the council is kind of just like arbitrarily deciding. But that's where I would disagree, is like, I don't think that this is arbitrary. I think they're banning it sort of for the reasons that I'm kind of outlining, is that it's there's not very effective counterplay to the item Quick Claw. Yeah, there could be somewhat effective counterplay into a Pokemon like Camerupt, sure, but like, you can't, because you can't know which Pokemon has that item, like, you can't really play around it. And I would say as well, like, items that are even worse than it, like Focus Band. Focus Band is a completely terrible item. There's no Pokemon in the game that gets more value out of Focus Band than any other item that it could be running. But the fact of the matter is, there is literally no counterplay to it other than knockoff, which is like, for the reasons that I kind of mentioned before, not really like super effective counterplay into it. Your opponent, if they have Focus Band, they could get a 10% chance they just live, and then they get like a Dragon Dance off with their Tyranitar, and which causes them to just like snowball and win the game. And they could even like chain that. Like, Focus Band does not have any sort of restriction on when it can be activated. Literally, at any point, you could get a Focus Band proc. Even if you're at 1 HP and it procced the previous turn, you can get it to happen again. In fact, I have seen a replay where it procced 3 times in a row, and the person got 3 Dragon Dances with their Tyranitar for it, and they swept the team that they should have lost to from that position. And it's like, that's kind of funny, of course. It, like, for like a ladder replay, it was cool to see, but like, if the goal of the competitive scene is to allow players the chance to express their skill to try to win the game, like, Focus Band is completely antithetical to that. And honestly, I would have banned Focus Band before I even would have banned Quick Claw, even though literally nobody uses Focus Band, because it's like a vast majority of the time a completely terrible item. But I think Quick Claw is closer in the spectrum to like that Focus Band than it is to like a more like guaranteed value item that doesn't like super duper swing the game on like a turn, like introducing a lot of variants, like, you know, leftovers or even like Salic Berry. Like, yeah. So, like, I understand, right? Like, should we be spending most of our time, or like all of our like discussion time on an item that literally gets used by maybe one Pokemon, and that Pokemon is a Pokemon that gets used like maybe 1% on ladder and like one out of every 300 games in a tournament? Maybe not, but I think one of the things that's really awesome about ADV, which I hope you all agree with, is that it's a really good metagame. It's really balanced. I think the state of this game right now is fantastic. I love playing it. And there's not much that is wrong with it, really. Like, like a lot of the strategies are very fun to play with and to play around. Now, Quick Claw is one of the things that I think is not that fun to play around. At least from the perspective of I want to try to win because I want to express my skill to the opponent. So even though it hardly ever comes up and is usually on Pokemon that make your team worse for putting that Pokemon on them, I still support the ban because, like, I don't, just kind of harping back on my one point here. And if you want to say like, well, that point sucks and you don't have another point, well, okay, fair enough. That like you can't really effectively play around the item Quick Claw. So like whether it gets used viably or not, I'm kind of I'm still of the opinion we still ban that. Like if there was a move, I saw this in the comments as well. I do agree with it, but I do think it's also a little bit like, I don't know if I want to say straw man ish, but like, you know, if there was a move that you click it and let's say 99% of the time your Pokemon dies when you click this move, but 1% of the time it puts a message on your opponent's screen that says you're locked out of clicking moves. You have to forfeit the game right fucking now. Would people use that move in a competitive context? No, because most of the time it's a really low value click that is probably losing you the game. But 1% of the time you force your opponent to just lose, and that shit would get spammed on ladder by like low ladder by people trolling, and it literally takes all this expression out of the game. We're not even playing the game anymore. You're kind of just like playing slots and stealing ELO from an opponent if you happen to hit the jackpot. I would ban that immediately. Like that, because it's completely antithetical to like the competitive aspect of the game. And Quick Claw is not nearly that egregious, right? Like there's still some amount of strategy behind the Quick Claw, but the fact that your opponent is extremely limited in their forms to counterplay around it is the problem for me. So going to continue to harp on that point. There is a real opportunity cost to running Quick Claw, and I've seen this as an argument, and I do think that this is valid and true. If you're running Quick Claw, you can't run an item like Leftovers that is going to get you generally more value on most Pokemon. So, like, there's a team building decision to be made, and it makes it, like, not an auto include for Pokemon, and that kind of like affects its viability. And I do think that there is something cool about Pokemon in that the decisions that you make, like in your EVs and your item usage and your moves, and even which Pokemon you do, is like a it's a decision that you can't take very lightly, because if you choose one thing, you might not be able to choose another thing, and that other thing might be like necessary to win in certain matchups. So you have to figure out, can I make a game plan, or do I have to make other choices to justify the choices that I've already made? And that's what's really fun for Pokemon about Pokemon for me. And yeah, I know that it's like certain metagames like Gen 2 and 1 kind of like reduce that a little bit. Like, you know, in Gen 2, virtually the only item that has any sort of merit to use is leftovers, unless your name is Marowak. And in Gen 1, there are no items at all. And in both of those gens, you can just run max EVs. So virtually every Pokemon just runs max EVs all the time. So yeah, there's a little bit less skill expression in the team builder there, because there's not as many opportunity costs to contend with. Although I do think that Gen 1 and 2 competitive are very fun in their own ways. So not to slander them. Sorry if you thought that I was gonna talk crap on your favorite metagame. I actually think they're very fun. Or Gen 2 I think is especially very fun. Gen 1 scares me, but I appreciate the high level of competition that exists in that tier. So yeah. Anyway, while that's true, while I do think that it does present an interesting choice for people building teams, like could I be running Quick Claw, and is it worth it to run Quick Claw over the leftovers? The fact of the matter is, I don't think that offsets like the in-game application of the item and how it warps the counterplay. So again, I'm a broken record. Got my 1 point, and yeah. So, but no, I think this is a valid take, and anybody who had this, I agree with you. I think you're right that there is a real opportunity cost to running this item. You could be running like Salakberry, for example, instead, which is going to more often it's going to come up more often. You can strategize to get into the Salakberry range, and it's going to like more commonly affect the outcome of the game, because you're always going to be faster than your opponent if you're sufficiently fast enough. So that's kind of cool there. But I think I would even argue maybe like, well, I would value people who formulate a solid game plan around getting their Salakberry Pokemon to sweep than people who are gonna like roll the dice for Quick Claw to bail them out, right? X Pokemon's viability is going to be tanked with a Quick Claw ban, and X Pokemon in this case is usually Camerupt. People across the comments who made this sort of thing did keep it general most of the time. Like, oh, I like using this low tier slow Pokemon that otherwise wouldn't have much of a niche without Quick Claw. Well, I mean, the fact of the matter is that some Pokemon are better than others, and I'm not here to like say to promote Pokemon classism in a sense that, like, you know, only the elite of the elite Pokemon should ever be used. But I don't think it's for the sake, like, just for the sake of variety. I don't think it's healthy to keep an item that like warps the strategy of the game just to make that Pokemon sometimes do something in a game. You know, like, I don't know, let's say you use a Pokemon like Octillery, right? Octillery is a fairly slow Pokemon. It's not super duper strong, and even if you put Quick Claw on it, it's almost never gonna be a Pokemon that achieves much value. But, you know, on occasion, it sometimes gets that proc, and it sometimes kills a Pokemon that is at low HP that it shouldn't have killed. Okay. cool. Is that really like what we value in a competitive Pokemon game? Like, is it like the fact that Octillery was able to find a 1 in 20 chance to do something when 80% of the time it would do nothing, and if if there was no Quick Claw, 100% of the time it would probably do nothing. I'm not so convinced by that. Now, yeah, Camerupt is a kind of cool Pokemon, and I do appreciate the value that it has outside of Quick Claw. It's a really nice Zapdos switch-in for one, and there are definitely teams that you can use with Camerupt, regardless of whether you have Quick Claw or not, where you can have a strategy where you switch Camerupt into Zapdos, and then you explode as they go to their Water type. And now you've removed their Water type from the game, which means that the rest of your teammates who may be not super duper conducive to beating Water types are unlocked for the game. And you don't need Quick Claw for that, right? That's a really cool application of Camerupt, and if I make a video about Camerupt, which maybe I should, that's definitely the sort of strategy that I would employ. And like, regardless of whether we have Quick Claw, you can find viability in that anyway. Like Camerupt, okay, it's a Pokemon that is like, it's E ranked, it's probably like top 60, probably not top 40 in ADV. Because of there's no Quick Claw, I don't think Camerupt is really going to be that much less viable, to be honest. Quick Claw does not carry Camerupt's viability. It does help it for sure. It is probably its best item, but the teams that would run Camerupt probably still run Camerupt with leftovers, and probably still are just about as good, despite not having Quick Claw. It just means that in the other 1 in 5 games where you face a Dugtrio, you're not going to be getting a kill on Dugtrio. Like, okay. Most of the time you're not anyway, so whatever. If you're thinking of a different Pokemon that isn't Camerupt, I'm just, like, I don't mean to be callous about it. Shoutouts to Callous Narrates, by the way. But, like, that Pokemon's unviable anyway, whether it has Quick Claw or not. Like, what would you even use? I don't know, like, who's a slow? Let me pull up the builder actually real quick. Who's a slow Pokemon that you may even try? You may even think about using Quick Claw on in the low tiers. Slowking. Okay, whether the Slowking has Quick Claw or not, it's still bad. Like, it's not gonna be competitively useful without it. Now, yeah, again, that does sound very callous when I say that, but I'm saying that because some people are framing it in terms of viability, and the fact of the matter is, Quick Claw is not affecting the viability of any Pokemon, frankly speaking. I know what you really mean by this, though, is that, like, a Pokemon like Slowking, if your strategy is to try to squeeze some value out of it with Quick Claw, the fact that Quick Claw is banned means that you can't squeeze that value out of that Pokemon. In which case, you go from a Pokemon that is useless or out... okay, Slowking's a little... I'm dogging on it kind of a lot here. I'm going to say it's outclassed by more consistent water types such as Suicune. And yeah, we'll leave it at that. You're saying that, like, we are not achieving value with the Slowking that is unique to it instead of Suicune 80% of the time with Quick Claw, but now it's 0%, like, it's 100% of the time now that Quick Claw is banned. And yes, I feel for you on that, but this is where I think maybe there's, like, a challenge that could be issued here. Try to find a way to use a Pokemon like Slowking, or like, I don't know, I'm not going to bother trying to find another example. We just stick with Slowking. Try to find a way to use Slowking that doesn't rely entirely on the random effect of Quick Claw. Like, try to find other ways to support it with its speed. Like, you could use Thunder Wave to make all the opponent's Pokemon slower, and then you've played very carefully. You set up the pieces in such a way now Slowking is outspeeding almost all of your opponent's Pokemon, and it's getting value with its superior coverage there. Like, it's got Surf, Psychic, Fire Blast, Ice Beam. Like, it can hit a lot of Pokemon for very super effective damage. So, like, there you go. Or like find like, okay, like there's actually a niche defensive application for Slowking. Like, let's say, for example, it's really good into Psychic Fire Jirachi because it doesn't take it takes resisted damage from both of those things. So if I have a team that is like weak to that particular Jirachi set, it handles the other Jirachi sets just fine. Maybe Slowking has a niche there, and I can use like the opponent's Jirachi as a way to set up Calm Minds for my own Slowking, and then I can sweep with the Slowking thereafter. That's like, I think that's really cool when players are able to find that way to use the Pokemon. Whereas I feel like Quick Claw is kind of like it's kind of like cheating a little bit in that, I don't need to come up with a unique or well thought out game plan. I'll just rely on the RNG to bail me out in a sense there. And I know there's some irony. I said, use Thunder Wave to help with your speed support, but like the idea is that regardless of whether you get full paraturns or not, you're still getting value out of Thunder Wave in that sense. And there's only a 10% chance, or the Smogon bans everything crowd. Like, I mean, I don't have any sympathy for this. Like, not okay if it was a genuine mistake, like you thought it did have 10%. We don't have to split hairs about it. Everybody makes mistakes. I said that Quillfish has Intimidate in one of my videos, and it does not in ADV. Okay, but I'm gonna wager a lot of people that said something like this, or especially like the Smogon just bans everything. You don't play the game. If you don't play the game, I don't care what you have to say. I'm just gonna be frank with you. Like, do I care what? Do you care what I have to say about tennis? I don't fucking play tennis. I don't even watch it. I mean, I have some friends who watch it, and I appreciate their love for the game, but I don't play it. So you wouldn't care about my opinion on it. And so same sort of thing. If you don't play ADV and you're just like coming in to like kind of grift on the Smogon crowd, I don't care what you have to say. Sorry about it, but that's okay. Maybe I'm getting a little bit more heated than I was intending to get. So let's just move on. And then the last is the fun aspect. And this is really, I think, where the meat and potatoes of this discussion. We're already an hour and 18 minutes in, but we're finally getting to the point here. This is classic Petrifolium. But yeah, the fun aspect. So, what makes competitive Pokemon fun? This could be, in and of itself, its own video, full length, 1 hour and 30 minutes, Tetrafolium style. But I'm not gonna belabor this point too much. I'm gonna boil it down to sort of the nitty-gritty, the bare essentials, whatever platitudinous phrase that I could throw in that communicates this point. What I think the sort of idea is here, and tie this back into why I think there's a little bit of a disconnect between what the Smogon crowd and the non-Smogon crowd, the YouTube crowd, kind of thinks about this thing. So, yeah. There's, I think, a little bit of a misalignment in what I'm going to term as hardcore competitive Pokemon players and casual competitive Pokemon players in what they value. Now, note, when I say casual, I don't mean it derogatorily. I think that it is a I use it as a term to sort of denote players who are not like this is not like their main hobby, right? And it's great, I think, to have a casual audience in something like this. Most of the people who play, most of you who are watching this, probably fall into the casual camp, where you'll play a few games every now and then. Maybe like you play a few games on the weekend to relax, and that's just like what it is. And you'll watch like a Jimothy Cool video or a Zet's video or my video every now and then. Or even maybe you watch them, all of them, but you don't play tournaments and stuff like that. That's fine. I really do value that in the community. If we didn't have that, well, for one, my YouTube channel would be extremely unsuccessful, and for two, we wouldn't be able to like reach out and get new players in the game. And that's like, it's healthy to get new players in. And we should definitely be making decisions based on what would accommodate new players. So, yeah. But the hardcore is going to be the people who, they're like ride or die with this. They're playing it like you're playing like almost every day. You're probably talking about Pokemon almost every day. You play tournaments when they come up. You might have a YouTube channel about Pokemon in the case of some of us. Yeah, that's what the hardcore sort of denotes there. And yes, okay, most hardcore players are going to be more skilled at the game than casual players by virtue of just like sheer experience. But that has really not much to do with the discussion here. Whether you're skilled or not, it doesn't. I don't really make that doesn't really make much of a difference in what I'm about to talk about here. But let's talk about what I think makes the game fun for hardcore players. And I think it's a term that I've kind of been using throughout this video: skill expression. Skill expression is the choices that you make in a game, like being the dominant factor in affecting the outcome of the game. So what I choose to put in my team, like what moves I choose, what EVs, which Pokemon, etc., being a determining factor in my ability to win the game. And then the moves that I decide to click as well. That, I think, is what most hardcore Pokemon players really value. And I think that's not necessarily, concentrated to Pokemon. You ask Smash players, you ask League of Legends players, Fortnite players, I guess. I don't know. I don't play a lot of other video games. What they value when they're like in the competitive scene for those games. And I think for the most part it's going to boil down to the skill expression. I don't think that that's necessarily the case for casual players, and I don't think that we're mutually exclusive in what we value either. Like, certainly if you are more of a casual player, maybe all you do is just watch tournament replays on Revival tournaments. You don't actually play, but you just like that, and you can appreciate when a really skilled player finds a way to clinch a game. And yeah, that's cool. But what I think more casuals are sort of like, they're at the core of their enjoyment of the game, I think, is novelty. Novelty is just like a kind of a catch-all term for like things that are new or unusual, and like that could be like a Pokemon that is unusual. Like maybe you haven't seen very many people use, say, Wailord in a game, and when you open up a replay or a commentary video on a tournament and you see somebody used Wailord and won with it, you're like, whoa, that's really cool. Like, I've never thought about using Waylord before. I've never seen it be used before. And the fact that somebody was able to, like, achieve, like, reasonable value with it, and that caused them to win the game, that's their form of skill expression, right? That's what you really like. And maybe you're like, I want to try that on ladder, and you're gonna use Waylord to satisfy that sort of novelty aspect. That's cool. I also like that to some extent there. But where maybe the Quick Claw gets kind of contentious between these two ideas. Quick Claw, I think, is negative, or has a negative impact on skill expression, because as the person who, like, once again, I keep harping on this, sorry to sound like a broken record, as the person who is not using Quick Claw, my forms of counterplay are limited. Oftentimes I'm just going to have to play into it, and you, as the Quick Claw user, maybe you have a little bit more agency, shout out to Blunder, by the way, in what is happening, because you could choose to switch as well, but you could play into it, and then we're kind of gambling here, and we're doing like a weighted dice roll. And yes, like me as the non-Quick Claw user, I'm more likely going to win that dice roll, but the fact that I can't really like do anything to avoid it is what is hampering the skill expression for me. Whereas for like a casual player who is more invested in the novelty of it, it's like, isn't it kind of cool when a Magneton outspeeds the fastest Pokemon in the game, Aerodactyl, and manages to kill it despite the fact that it would have otherwise had a losing matchup? Like, there's something kind of interesting about that, right? Like, oh, it was unexpected, and like surprising, and that makes me feel an emotion that is that I like. It's the same thing that you feel like when you're on a roller coaster and you feel like the drop coming in. It's like, or like a horror movie and the like monster or the slasher manages to catch one of the characters. It's like, oh my gosh, like, but like that's where there's, I think, a little bit of a rub here. Like a lot of you who maybe fall into more like the casual camp, maybe, or like, I like the variety that's offered in Pokemon. I like that you can choose a bunch of different items, like Quick Claw, for example. I like that it can make certain Pokemon like Camerupt, who is otherwise a less seen Pokemon, find a little bit more usage, even if it's only just a little bit. And like, yeah, that variety, I think that's what you guys are into, right? Like, by and large. I might be off base on this. I definitely fall more in the hardcore camp. The reason why I play is because I want to show like that my mastery of the game is effective for like trying to win the game. And you know, I'm not saying that the casual doesn't care about winning. Like, if you guys are playing, I'm sure you want to win, but it's not necessarily like I want to win by outskilling the opponent all the time. I want to win because I want to show off this cool idea that I had that maybe catches them by surprise. Is maybe a little bit more likely that somebody in the casual camp is into that than the hardcore. I don't think there's like a super duper hard dividing line either. I think, once again, like, I love when novel things happen. Like, you know, when somebody brings like an underused set, like you know, Salicberry Suicune, and it's in the back, and they've set themselves up in a position where it's like, okay, most other Suicune sets are gonna get outsped and lose here, but we got hit into our Salic range, we get the boost, and now all of a sudden we're winning the game. But I love that. I love the novelty in that, but I also love the skill expression there, that they game planned for that, and that's really cool. But to not repeat myself too much and to sort of like progress the point here, once again, I don't think we're all that different. I think one of the things that both casual and hardcore players like about Pokemon is the social element. Pokemon is a very social game, especially if you're into the communities around it. Like the fact that I get to make YouTube videos and you guys get to enjoy them. Well, maybe, I don't know, if maybe you don't enjoy this. Maybe you've left a dislike already, which honestly, if you got this far and you didn't like it and you left a dislike, I'm cool with that because I got all the watch time and dislikes are engagement too. So, but to be less cynical about it, like the fact that we can have a discussion like this and that this can occupy some of your time to think and that we get to interact in a sort of sense here is what's really cool. And I've made a lot of friends playing Pokemon, and I'm sure a lot of you have as well. And I hope that this video and this decision to ban Quick Law is not going to harm that, because at the end of the day, like, yeah, okay, it does. Maybe if you're somebody who likes the novelty of Quick Claw, or you had some sort of strategy involving Quick Claw and now you can't use it anymore, like that does suck, and I do feel for you. But like, to me, the game's still fun, and I still like to play it with my friends, and I still like to talk about it with my friends, and I hope that regardless, you guys also feel that way. So I want to leave this video talking a little bit about Smogon forums, and to help you guys affect decisions and or be involved in the community should something like this happen again. And even if not, like, I still think it's awesome to get involved in the community. So I want to sort of like leave off on this. So the Smogon forums have existed since 2004. We could talk a whole history about this. I'm going to keep it brief, though, because I don't think that this is the time and the place to talk about all that history. But like, literally, Smogon forums have existed before Pokemon Showdown even existed. Most of us, myself included, probably are associated with Smogon in proximity to Pokemon Showdown. Like, I started playing in 2014 when X and Y came out, and like my first interaction with competitive Pokemon was through Pokemon Showdown, which had already existed by the time that I started there. It wasn't very old, I don't think. Showdown has only existed, I think, since 2013, maybe? I don't know. Asterisk on that. Citation needed. But yeah, the forums have existed since even before that. And competitive play has existed since like 1999, arguably maybe even earlier than that. But yeah, it's really cool that the community is this old. And each metagame has a council that is responsible for maintaining those metagames and responding to community suggestions. So Quick Claw, it wasn't just banned out of nothing. The people who are on the Smogon forums who talk about ADV and talk about sort of the metagame developments, they were requesting that we take a look at this. So the council's response to that was to send out a poll and say, what do you guys think? And the decision to ban it was in response to that poll. If you were involved in the Smogon community, you would have had the opportunity to vote on this. And frankly, maybe I should take a little bit of responsibility, and I should have let you guys know, because I did know that poll existed when I put out my poll on YouTube. However, I didn't realize that it was literally going to be the deciding factor in whether Quick Claw got banned or not. Had I known that, I probably would have sent a link at the very least, so that those of you who are comfortable making a Smogon profile and going through the voting process, which was very easy. You just click a link and then say yes or no to the ban, pretty much. Could have had your say in it. So maybe I should take a little bit of responsibility there as a sort of, I guess, influencer. It's so weird to say that. It sounds very like not human. I don't know. But yeah. And I think that this is really valuable. If we didn't have Smogon or tiering councils, then rule sets and the community would be decentralized. Like, there was a point in ADV's history where concurrently you had metagames that where Celebi and Jirachi and Suicune were banned in one form, and other communities where they played with level 50 Pokemon, and others where like Doug Trio was not allowed, and where Baton Pass was not allowed. And these were all like different sort of groups. It was basically like, you know, if we were playing pickup basketball and we have different rules about like what things are. Like some people play where a basket is always 1 point. Some people play with like 2 pointers and a 3-point line. Some people play where you call your own foul. Some people have a referee. Some people say there are no foul. Like, you know, you get crazy house rules basically. And you know, you could still definitely have fun in that aspect. I'm sure BKC does. But like, I like that it's centralized and that there's one sort of dominant unifying rule set that we can all kind of agree to, because it means that all of us get to like experience the game together. And okay, maybe we don't all necessarily agree what the best rule set is, but we can all at least come to a compromise on what is a reasonable rule set to play under. And there we go. And you know, if you don't like this rule set and it's like so egregious to you that you don't want to play under that rule set, then you are free to try to make your own community. I mean, I don't want to like say like, you know, my way or the highway, buddy, because that's really not what I'm saying. But there are definitely other ways to experience the competitive Pokemon experience. There have been offshoot communities, like for example, there's an other metagame called 35 Pokes, where like every month they choose 35 Pokemon that are allowed to be used in the metagame, and they like play a bunch of friendlies together, and then they have like a tournament at the end of the month with that format. And every month it cycles out, and it's not Smogon based, but it's a really cool community, and somebody had that idea and wanted to try it out and made some success in doing so. And there are ways to accommodate that, and we could talk about that if that's what you're trying to do. I can maybe try to give you some advice in the comments if that's what you're interested in. But yeah, like I like that there's like a lot of options for that. You can even use Showdown for that. You don't have to code your own thing. Like there's ways to do like custom rule sets in Showdown, which is cool. And what happens now with the Quick Claw here, just to slightly tie the Quick Claw ban into this, I don't really think the ban changes that much. Yes, I know, like it's fresh in our minds. We're all getting a little bit emotional about it, but logically speaking, like 98, 99% of all teams that exist didn't use Quick Claw at all. Didn't have to necessarily build around the idea of Quick Claw. Like the metagame's going to be more or less the same, and like it was rarely used in tournaments, so but for reasons of inconsistency and unpopular reputation. Excuse me, I'm talking too long, my voice is getting hoarse and I'm losing my mind. But yeah, the tournament playing crowd hardly ever used it. Ladder, like, yes, there are definitely people who did use it and did like kind of swear by it even, but most of you guys, if you enjoy, you're probably gonna move on to the next trend, whatever the new cool thing is. And you know, I hope that it's something that makes you happy to play, and is also something that is amenable to the hardcore audience as well. Not to say that we're literally like only taking the hardcore into perspective and fuck you guys if you're not. That's not what I'm saying. But sometimes we do butt heads on that, and sometimes you know, never mind. Let's not bog down the discussion any further here. But yeah, most like casuals will move on to whatever the next team is. If it's like clicking hypnosis and baton passing calm minds, like, okay, cool. I think that's fine. I think there's a little more counterplay to that. I'd be more interested in playing those games than I would necessarily around like quick claw spam. So, yeah, let's get it. Let's get on ladder and do that. But I want to let's sort of end off here is like, if you want your voice to be heard the next time that there is tiering action in ADV or any metagame for that matter, I really do encourage you to make a Smogon account and sort of like take some time to look at the community there. I also want to like, I'll put a link to the Discord that I'm the most active in. It's Zetz's Discord, if you're familiar with him, which I'm sure you are, because if you're a fan of me, you should be a fan of him. Because we do everything together. We like finish each other's sentences and all that type of cutesy stuff. But yeah, I encourage you to get involved in these communities. Try to make some friends who have similar interests here, and you'll be informed the next time that something is happening. Like, who knows? Maybe they're gonna suspect test your favorite Pokemon in like, I don't know, like maybe they're like, we're gonna see if the community wants to ban Milotic, that's not gonna happen, but like, just for example, and you're like, no, I like Milotic, I don't want it to be banned. And then the next time you won't be blindsided by this. You can have your say. Try to make your voice heard at the very least. So yeah, I hope that you all appreciate those resources. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If it got you through your work day, then that's great. Tell me about it. I love when people say that, because I love to watch long videos when I'm at work too, because I'm bored as hell. So yeah, and if you disagree with me or the decision here, then like, that's fine, and you can certainly feel free to let us know in the comments about it. Yeah, but regardless of what the case is, I hope you have a good day, and I hope you've enjoyed your time here.